Illuminati.
Didn't the Templar turn into the Masons?
Is to preserve the knowledge of the antediluvian world.
How do they get the knowledge?
He said that the lower levels of the Masonic order, that they give them a different meaning to the symbols.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I thought it was.
Yeah, the occult is a very broad term. The mystery schools are a little more specific.
All these billionaires are building these underground bunkers, and they have this.
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier, you think, all these billionaires are building these underground bunkers, and they have this access. I know it's a fact.
Yep.
But that they have access to all this ancient knowledge through what, the occult?
Through the mystery schools.
I mean, at what point do you just get introduced like, oh, hey, you made it. Here's the
You mean into the mystery
knowledge.
schools?
You might want to build a bunker.
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. But
what is the occult? I'm new to all of this.
Okay, so, the occult is a very general term. The occult can encompass, your everyday Satanist.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I thought it was.
Yeah, the occult is a very broad term. The mystery schools are a little more specific. The mystery schools go back to the ancient times. And the function of the mystery school, fundamentally, is to preserve the knowledge of the antediluvian world. And more specifically, to preserve the knowledge that was transmitted to mankind by the gods who descended in the Golden Age. That is the purpose of the mystery schools. And there's various mystery schools around the world, but...
like what? What are they?
Well, you had the Elysian mysteries that were the ancient Greek mysteries. You had the Egyptian mysteries. You have the modern adaptations, like you had the Knights Templar, who were to some extent a mystery school. But then you had the Masons, the Freemasonry.
Didn't the Templar turn into the Masons?
The Masons preserve some of the traditions of the Templar order. Yes, there's modifications, but fundamentally there's the let's say the pillars of Masonry do come to some extent from the Knights Templar. And so you have different variations of mystery schools. This is the Illuminati, right? Mm-hmm. That would be a one faction of the mystery schools, or maybe a term that encompasses them all. And again, the primary purpose of the mystery schools is to preserve the knowledge that was transmitted by the gods to mankind in the antediluvian world before the cataclysm. The knowledge that was transmitted to mankind during the Golden Age, during Zep Tepi the first time. And that is functional knowledge, by the way. It's not just, it's not just sort of arcane, mysterious knowledge that pertains to, just bizarre stuff. No, we're talking about functional knowledge, information that is very important, that is transmitted through myths also. Myths transmit knowledge. The wise concocted those myths. The ancient sages they devised the myths. And we're talking about the famous myths from the ancients among the Greeks and the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Mesopotamians. What we today look at as bedtime stories. What we today view as folklore, and of course, historians and archaeologists and anthropologists don't really give much weight to these myths. Oh, that's just Greek mythology. But the myths were intentionally designed to transmit information, to preserve information and transmit it through time. And it's done primarily through symbolism. Because languages change, right? Mm-hmm. Languages change, but the meaning of the symbols always remains the same.
So how do you think these guys get into, how do they get the knowledge? Have you thought about that?
You mean the people who are in the...
Yeah, the bunker builders.
So they
could just be worried about nuclear war.
There's a couple of things that's true. Yes, absolutely. That's certainly in play. But there's a couple of ways. I mean, one, if you're a member of the mystery schools, and I'm not saying your neighborhood Freemason, mm-hmm. Just your average Joe who happens to be a member of a lodge. No, you got to be way high up into these organizations before they start to transmit this information to you. Because at the lower levels of Masonry, they're not told. This comes from, by the way, Manly P. Hall, who is one of the greatest Masonic philosophers, probably the greatest Masonic philosopher. he said that the lower levels of the Masonic order, that they give them a different meaning to the symbols, and they don't tell them the true meaning behind the rituals and the symbols, and you don't get the true meaning until you get to the higher levels. And I think that's probably true across the board in the mystery schools. But so you can learn this in the mystery schools, or I think at this point probably let's just assume for a moment, and I don't know if it's true. Okay, It's just a hypothesis. Let's assume that there is a body out there in the solar system that's coming back in, that's on this path around the sun, that it gets slingshotted back out into outer space, comes back around every 6,480 years. Maybe we've detected it. Maybe NASA's detected it. Maybe some of our military satellites up there have detected this body that's coming into our solar system. And that, I think, would prompt, the building of underground bunkers. We have deep underground military bases. I'm sure you're aware of that all over the world, but especially under the continental United States. We're talking 1 mile to 2 miles below the surface of the Earth. And it was
1 mile to 2 miles
below the surface of the Earth. Yes.
I just watched this documentary last night about how Russia dug basically a hole. They got, I think, 7.1 miles deep.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't go anymore. Nobody else has done it. They said that the Earth, I can't remember if it was every mile or every kilometer, the Earth, it gets 60 degrees hotter.
Yeah. Probably.
So it'll be like 120 degrees.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened, and then the audience can draw their own conclusions. But during World War II, do you remember what one of the primary problems for Hitler was? One of the major reasons why the Nazis lost that war was because we were bombing the bejesus out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, the bombing of Dresden. We weren't just bombing, military and industrial targets. We bombed cities, right? We firebombed cities. And the purpose behind this campaign, this bombing campaign, was to decimate Hitler's industrial base, for one thing, so that he couldn't build weapons fast enough, and so we were hitting the airfields, we were hitting the industrial plants, and a lot of these industrial plants were located in the cities. So Hitler decided, and he did it too late, he decided that he was going to move his manufacturing to subterranean facilities. I mean, this is logical, right? Now, that's an enormous undertaking to do that. You can't just move manufacturing underground on a whim. That's an enormous project, but he began to do it. And there was an organization called the Todt Organization that was in charge of building these underground facilities. And by the end of World War II, there were underground facilities. Now, they weren't 1 mile under the ground, but they were pretty deep. And they were using, in some instances, slave labor to do it. And had Hitler done this earlier, we would have been in trouble, because we would not have been able to disrupt the production of the armaments. And after the war,
no matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.